This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with a crazy story, and you can see the title on your screen. Guy cancels wedding after fiancé uses hall pass to sleep with his friend. And let me tell you something, you're going to find out that this story includes much, much more than what I could fit in that title. And it's a crazy one, like I said, so let's get into it. He starts out and he says, I met my fiancé at a Halloween party in 2020. We talked and discovered we had similar interests and were both solo poly. Now I had to look up this solo poly because I didn't know what it meant, and it stands for solo polyamorous. And what that means, it's a person who just likes to hook up. They like to go out with different people, hook up with them, but they don't form any relationships. And according to him, they were both that way. He says after the party, I went back to her place and ended up staying over. No surprise there, my man. He goes on and says she told me later that she had one of her regulars lined up that night, but texted him to cancel after we hit it off. We both knew right away we'd be sleeping together that night. After that, we became regulars, and I started spending every night at her place. We realized we had something more going on between us, and I moved in with her a month later. Are you crazy? It was the first time I'd ever lived with a woman, but it felt natural. We both work and have good jobs. She's 31 and manages a convenience store, and I'm 38 and work in sanitation, so he's a garbage man. I know some of you are going to make fun of our jobs, but between us we made over $100,000 last year, so F off. Hey, thumbs up to you and your girlfriend, OP. I think that's great, and I respect anyone regardless of what position they have, as long as they do honest work and do a good job. We were monogamous from the start, and after living together for 2 years, I proposed to her on Valentine's Day, and she accepted. So when they met, they were both solo poly. They like to sleep around with all kinds of people. But he's saying that once they got together, they were monogamous from that day forward. Neither of us ever thought we'd be the marrying type, but again, it felt natural. We didn't have a firm date set for the wedding, but knew we wanted to get married in Las Vegas. We wanted to do it at the wedding chapel where Elvis married Anne Margaret in Viva Las Vegas. This was the first movie we ever watched together, and it held a special place for us. So if you're not familiar with that movie, Viva Las Vegas, it's a movie, as he indicated, starring Anne Margaret and Elvis, and it was set back in the 60s. Really campy movie, but it's actually kind of enjoyable if you've ever watched it, but that's what he's referring to here. We were thinking of going in May, but I was busy at work, so we postponed it until the fall when the weather cools off. I made reservations for us to fly out on October 30th, and we plan to get married the following day on Halloween. It's our favorite holiday, plus it was also the 3-year anniversary of the day we met, so we thought it would be cool. We were going to dress like Gomez and Morticia, as she loves goth and is obsessed with the Addams Family. Neither of us had ever been to Vegas but always wanted to go, so I wanted to make the trip memorable. I made reservations for 3 nights on the Strip, followed by 2 nights in downtown. While there, we also planned to tour Hoover Dam and go to the Mob Museum. 2 weeks before we were scheduled to leave, I was asked to go out of town for a week to fill in for a crew that was down a man and falling behind. The location was over 35 miles from our apartment, so the company would pay for my hotel and meals. As an incentive, I was also guaranteed to work at least 20 hours of overtime, so I took the assignment. On the Saturday before I left, we took an Uber downtown and spent the entire night bar hopping. By the end of the night, we were both loaded and were dancing with each other and with other people. Uh-oh. We had a great time, and it brought back memories of our free-spirited days. The following day, we slept till noon and then went out and ate a big brunch to sober up. While eating, we talked about the previous night and how much fun we had. We discussed our upcoming marriage and how it was only going to be just the two of us from that day forward. I don't know if it was me or her who brought up that maybe we should each have one more experience before we tied the knot. We'd been monogamous for nearly 3 years by then and thought it would be healthy. No, OP, it's not healthy. It's sick. It's not that we weren't fulfilled. We just wanted to get everything out of our system before we got married. The only rule we set was that protection had to be used for everything, and that we would let each other know when and what we did. We temporarily reactivated our Tinder accounts for this and planned to cancel them right after. It had been over 3 years since either of us had a random, and we were both looking forward to it. It's a turn on for us, and just talking about it made us both horny beyond belief. She jokingly came up with a name, now listen to this, Final Freedom F, to describe what we were about to do. Let me tell you something, folks. These people are just insane. I left early Monday morning and we texted constantly and talked 3 to 4 times a day while I was away. On Wednesday, I made a connection with a married woman who was in an open relationship. I made plans after work to meet her and her husband for a quick drink just to make sure we were all legitimate. Oh, these people. They were good people and we hit it off right away, but they threw me a curve. Now listen to what this curve is. She was 5 months pregnant. They told me they had been poly prior to having their 2 kids and wanted to get back into it now. Her husband said he had a date lined up, but wanted to make sure his wife had a partner before he did anything. Oh man, let me tell you something. I think this is just disgusting because here's this guy driving his wife, who happens to be the mother of his 2 children and has one in the oven. He's driving her over to meet a guy that she just met off the internet to do who knows what. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine just putting yourself in this guy's place and doing something like that? Like I said, these people are just totally disgusting. I had to think about the whole pregnancy thing for a minute, but then decided to go for it. I told them, let's do this, and they were both excited. I gave them my phone number and told her to meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. in my hotel lobby. The husband spoke up and asked, why not tonight? I said I was ready, but wanted to give them time to think it over. He looked at his wife and she told me she was ready now and didn't need to think about it. The husband said, we like you and can tell you're a good person, and she agreed. I said okay, but I needed to eat dinner first. The husband left to go meet his date, and I bought dinner for her and I. While we were sitting there, I noticed she smelled incredible. She had a sweet, musky smell I'd never experienced before. Whatever it was, it made me rock hard all through the dinner, and I couldn't wait to take her back to my hotel. She's giving off those pheromones, and it's driving him insane. He says when we got back to the hotel, we had amazing X the entire night. There was just something about her smell that turned me on, and I never turned off until we both fell asleep. The next morning I got up at 4:30 and took a shower, and her husband swung by at 5:30 to pick her up before I left. It was an awesome experience and one I'll never forget. Later that morning I called my girl and told her everything I did the previous night. She was happy for me and said hearing me describe it was really turning her on. She hadn't found anyone yet, but had calls set up with a couple guys and was hopeful one of them would work out for that evening. I was slammed with work that day, and my phone died as I forgot to charge it the prior night. You know why you forgot to charge it? Because you were with that pregnant woman, that's why. I didn't have my charger with me, so I wasn't able to power it up until I got back into the hotel. When I did, I had multiple texts and missed calls from my girl letting me know she had a date at 6. It was after 7 at that point, so I sent her a quick text telling her to have fun. She responded saying she was having drinks with her date and that she'd text me after. I was glad she found someone and went out to grab some food. When I got back to the hotel, I laid down to watch TV and fell asleep and didn't wake up until my alarm went off at 4:30. I looked at my phone and saw I had a text from my girl from 11:46 saying she was back home and was going to bed. She wrote that she had a great time, but not as good as with me. In a separate text, she stated she was looking forward to seeing me tomorrow and couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with only me. I texted her back saying I loved her and would call her later. I was really looking forward to getting back home and seeing her. There's just something about having X with your regular after having it with a random. If you're not poly, you wouldn't understand it, but trust me, it's awesome. I called her during my lunch break and asked where she wanted to go for dinner that night. She told me she'd have dinner waiting for me when I arrived, but there was a catch. I asked her, "What's the catch?" She said we'd have to eat our desserts first, he says with a smiley face. Mister, I would be very careful eating that dessert after what she did last night. He says that night we had the greatest time. It was the best experience either of us ever had, and we knew right then we'd have no problem spending the rest of our lives together. The following night we went out to eat and met up with two other couples. I noticed one of my buds was not acting right. I asked him what was up, and he said nothing, he was just a little tired. The night went on and we all had a blast. Sunday morning came and my girl and her mom went to visit her grandma at the nursing home. Later that morning I got a call from my bud who was acting weird the previous night. He sounded off and said he had something important to tell me. He came over and told me to sit down. He explained that Friday evening he and several of our mutual friends stopped at a bar right after work. He said everyone stayed until around 7, and then some of the group started heading home. Eventually, it was just him and one of our other friends, and they decided to have one more for the road. He said while they were chatting, this other friend pulled out his phone and said he had something to show him. He then proceeded to play a video of him effing my girl. My bud looked at me and said he was very sorry to have to tell me this, but felt I should know. When I heard this, I went nuts. I asked him if he was punking me, and he said he wished he was, but no. He tried calming me down, but I was too pissed. I started yelling and saying that I was going to end this other friend and other things which I'll not share here. My bud then asked if this was something that my girlfriend and I had agreed to, stating our other friend claimed it was. I told him we agreed to give each other a final hall pass, but not with friends. I told him I didn't specify that, but any sane person would know it was implied. He stayed with me a while because he didn't want me doing something crazy when my girl got back. I promised him I wouldn't and asked him to leave as I needed time to get my head on straight. As soon as he left, I jumped on my bike and headed over to the backstabber's house. He never locks his doors, so I walked right in. He was on the floor putting together a shelf and stood up to greet me. I walked right over and got in his face and asked if he effed my girl. He said, wait, no, and started stammering. I slapped his face and said, don't play dumb with me. He said, she told me you were okay with it. I told him I wasn't okay with it and he should have known that. I asked if he was ever going to tell me and he said yes. I slapped him again and told him he was lying. I then asked him to show me the video. He said, no man, I don't want to do that. I'll delete it. I told him to show me the video or he'd end up in the ICU unit. He walked over and picked up the phone off the end table. I again told him to show me the video. He said, no man, let me just delete it. I slapped him again and he fell back onto the couch. After that, he played the video and handed me the phone. I watched for a few seconds and had seen enough. I handed the phone back to him and told him to send me the video. He tried sending it, but it wouldn't go through because the file was too big. I was getting really frustrated, so I slapped him again, this time using my full force. Now, this guy has slapped him 4 times. By this time, the left side of his face was red and swollen, and his left eye was completely bloodshot. I snatched the phone out of his hand and left. Now let me tell you something right here, and I say this in a lot of my videos. Do not employ violence. This guy could have gotten a lot of trouble for what he did. Number 1, he entered this guy's home without permission. That's trespassing. Number 2, he slapped this guy 4 times. That's assault. And number 3, he took the guy's phone. That's theft. I'll say it again. Do not use violence unless it's for self-defense. Because if you do in these kind of situations, you're going to be the one who's going to get in trouble. When I got outside, I went into the phone settings and took the screensaver off so it wouldn't lock up on me. I then drove back to the apartment and waited for my girl to return. She tried texting and calling me several times, but I didn't bother answering. She came home around 1 and brought back lunch for us. She looked at me and asked why I didn't answer. She said she was trying to reach me to see what I wanted to eat. I kept silent, pulled out the phone, and began playing the video. I walked over to her and held the phone where she could see it and watched her face. As soon as she realized what it was, I could see the life drain out of her. She didn't say anything and just glared at the screen, then shot me a blank stare. She asked me, "What's the problem?" I said, "What's the problem? You were effing one of my friends. That's the problem." She said, "We agreed to this." I said, "I never agreed to that, and she should have known that friends and family members were off limits." She said she misunderstood and that she was sorry. She then asked if I was angry at her over this. I told her I wasn't angry, I was enraged, and asked her when she was going to tell me about this. She said never, because we agreed not to disclose the other person's identity since we wouldn't be hooking up with them again. I asked if she planned to keep effing him behind my back. She said of course not, explaining he was a last resort choice as she couldn't find anyone else. I told her, "So you realized it was wrong and still did it?" She said, "No, no, no," and started to cry. After that, I went into the bedroom and got my suitcase, which I hadn't yet unpacked from the previous week. She asked where I was going, and I told her I didn't know, but I wasn't staying there. I walked out to my car and she followed me. She asked me why it mattered, as it was just X. I said it mattered because he was my friend. Now I'll never be able to look at her or him the same way again. I slammed the car door and drove to my bud's apartment. I just needed someone to vent to for a while before I booked a hotel room and drank myself to sleep. When I got to his place, he insisted I stay there as he didn't think it was a good idea for me to be alone. So that's what I've done. We've been talking, watching football, and drinking beers all afternoon. He told me he thinks my girl is a whore. And he didn't say war, he said the word that begins with a W to describe certain women, but I can't say that on this platform. And that I should break up with her. He said he knew of at least a half dozen guys she's banged before me, not counting our ex-friend. He looked at me in the eye and asked if that was the kind of woman I wanted to marry. I told him her body count wasn't a big issue for me, since I have a high count too, but I understood his point. I told him I've never had an issue with her in 3 years, but I don't think I can get past this. Am I wrong here? And that's the end of his original post. And now we're going to look at some of the comments he got back. But before we do, I want to remind you, if you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment. That will help this channel out tremendously, and also make sure that this video gets seen by people all over the world. Now let's take a look at those comments. The first one is from a woman. She says, "My boyfriend and I are poly and don't have any restrictions on who we can see. If he feels like dating one of my friends, he's welcome to do it, and vice versa. I've gone on dates with his brother, can you imagine? And he's dated 2 of my cousins. If you really love one another, who your partner sleeps with shouldn't matter. Yes it should." Next, here's a response from a guy. He says, "Dude, let me first say that you and your girl are nasty. Having X with people you've just met is like playing with fire. You're both wild animals and have no business getting married. You should call off the wedding and then you both can do whatever you want. Just wrap it up and be careful." The next response is from a woman. She says, "I practice solo polyamory, so I understand your situation completely. Don't listen to all the incel trolls on here who can only get laid when they pay for it. You should talk it over with your partner and put your marriage plans on hold until you figure things out. I think you both have more exploring to do." And then finally, we have a response from a guy. He says, "She did your bro, man. There's no coming back from that. Keep her around for recreational use if you want, but if it were me, I'd send her packing. Plus, you said she's into goth? Those women are nothing but trouble. Also, be careful putting your hands on people. You could have gotten yourself into a lot of trouble. And for what? A heavily used woman? She ain't worth it." So that's a sampling of some of the responses he got back from the community, and now he comes back and gives us a couple updates. The first one occurred 4 days later. He says, "First, I want to say something to all the little pricks who left hateful comments. I don't give a shit if you've got a problem with our lifestyle. I've got a problem with your lifestyle, okay? How does that sound?" So this guy is making a big mistake here. The only thing that's going to do is make people respond even more. So the best thing to do in these kind of situations, if it's getting under your skin, is just to ignore them and then block them if you need to. But don't do this. He says, "Now for those of you who stuck around for the update, here goes." About an hour after I pressed send on my first post, my girl sent a text to my friend's phone that I still had with me. She apparently didn't realize I had it, even though I played the video from the device when I showed her. In the text, she asked him why he showed me their video when he promised he wouldn't do that. Now remember, she thinks the person she's texting is my former friend. I text her back from his phone saying he, meaning me, had a right to know, and that he, meaning him, didn't feel right not telling me. She replied back saying, "Okay, but why did you send the video? You could have just told him." She followed that up stating, "What he did is considered revenge orn." And it's not orn, it begins with a P, but I can't say that on this platform. So you see where she's going with this. She told him that I might break up with her over this, and if I do, she will file charges against him. I replied back as him, telling her, "Do what you want, sweet cheeks." Ooh. She replied, "You bastard." I wanted to test the water to see if she was telling the truth, so I messaged her saying I couldn't wait until we were together again and asked if she could come over tonight. She replied back saying he knew it was just the one time and that it could never happen again. She followed up saying she and I were getting married and she never wants to speak to him again. I replied back as him saying, "No, I won't accept that. I've got to have you in my bed." She never responded to this and instead blocked his number. My interpretation of this was that she was telling the truth about him understanding it was just a one-time thing. But I can't get past the fact that she hooked up with him behind my back. I'm still really pissed, but I do miss her. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. For now, I'm still staying at my bud's place, contemplating my next move. And that's the end of his first update. And then he comes back with his final update. Now, there may be more updates to this, but this is the final one that he left. And this final update came 6 days after his last update. He says, "I'm back with another update. Before I say anything, I'm sending out this warning to all the unemployed trolls on here. If you keep sending me messages, you will be blocked." So he's still getting into an altercation with these people online. He says, "Unlike you, I don't have time to spend all day playing video games and beating off." Oh, this dude. So after doing a lot of thinking, I called off the wedding. That's the first smart thing he's done in this entire story. While I do still love her, she has been forever tainted by my friend's seed, and I just can't get past that. I recently met with her to hear her out. She told me she's willing to do anything to save our relationship. She asked if we could just go back to being a monogamous couple again. I told her I don't want that anymore, at least not with her. She told me maybe I'll think differently in a few days once I settle down. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. I informed her that I watched the full video and saw her sucking and effing him, and I'll never be able to look at her the same way again. She snapped back saying he was wearing protection. You could see it in the video. She then asked why I didn't have a problem with all the other guys that came before me, but I have such a big problem with this guy. I said because he was my friend, and she knew that. The conversation wasn't going anywhere, and we were both getting upset, so I left her crying on the couch and headed back to my bud's place. She called me on the drive and asked if we could be FWBs without a relationship. I told her not now, but maybe in time we could. So he's not closing that door. I let her know if that happens, our relationship will never go beyond that. She told me she'd be fine with that as she just wants me in her life. As for the former friend, I went to his house yesterday and gave him back his phone after keeping it over a week. He never once tried getting it back from me, and that was probably a smart move on his part. I tried walking in, but he had the screen door locked, so I knocked. He opened the door and we talked through the screen. I told him I just came to return his phone. I held it up to show him, and placed it in front of the door. I told him that our friendship was over, but assured him he had nothing to worry about from me as I no longer posed a danger to him. I told him I was actually thankful things happened as they did because he prevented me from marrying her and saved me a lot of future grief. He wasn't speaking, so I turned around and left and haven't seen or heard from him since. As for me, I'm still living at my bud's place, but will be moving into my own apartment at the end of the month. He really helped me get through this whole ordeal and talk sense into me when I needed it. I'll be forever grateful to him for doing that. He won't let me give him any money for food or rent. So instead of my fiancé, I'm taking him to Vegas to show my appreciation. I'm paying for the airfare and our hotel rooms at the Luxor for 3 nights. He won't have to buy a drink on the trip, and I'll also pay for a few meals while we're there. We're going to party, gamble, and see how many women we can each score while we're there. We've got a $100 bet riding on it, so this guy is getting right back into his solo polyamory life. And that's the end of his story, and it was a crazy one, as you can see. And now I want to take a look at the morals of the story, and I actually only have one. And here it is. If you want to be solo polyamorous or have fun with a person who is, that's fine. But use protection and don't get into a committed relationship with them. And for God's sakes, don't even think of marriage with a person like that. So those are my thoughts on this story, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and what do you think about this whole concept of solo polyamory and polyamory in general? Have you done it? Would you ever consider it? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on the next one.